May the words of my mouth and the meditation of all of our hearts be pleasing to you, O Lord, the one who gives us strength and the one who does redeem us. Amen. A few years ago, one of my good friends, a former co-worker, in fact, Fran, called Sunday afternoon. We talked for a while, caught up with what was going on in each other's life. Fran's an Episcopalian, and so I asked her, how are things at church? Oh, Tim, all they ask about these days and talk about is money. That's all they talk about. So, well, Fran, let me try to help you understand from this side. I'm no longer a parishioner. I'm a priest and a rector, so let me kind of help you from this side of the communion rail with what that is about. But of course, this was this time of year when we talked. It's this time of year when virtually all churches, Episcopal and non-Episcopal churches, talk about money because we're, as you heard from Pete, we're in the process of setting our budget. And so we kind of have to know by your pledges and commitment what our ministry will look like in 2018. So I tried to explain that to her. I'm not sure Fran really liked all of that, but Jesus talked a lot about money. Jesus shared 38 to 40 parables, roughly. You remember a lot of those parables. Jesus was always asked, what is God's kingdom like? What is God like? And Jesus would tell stories. And roughly half of those involved money. I wonder why. I wonder why. Money is not a bad thing. Money is something we need to eat and give us shelter, clothing. Money is a good thing. Money is something that many of you have already earmarked to leave to your children and grandchildren to help them for a future generation. That's a good thing. That's a very good thing. I wonder why Jesus talked so much about money and our relationship to money. You remember one of those stories, a man went out and he was in the middle of a field and he came across this great treasure. So what did he do? He went and sold everything he had to get this treasure. Jesus said that's what God's kingdom is like. When God finds you, when you find God's kingdom, you just throw yourself completely in. It's as if you give up everything you own and have for the sake of God's kingdom. It's like a woman who, when the offering plate is passed around, gave 2 bits of a coin, because that meant everything in the world to her. And so she gave virtually everything she had. She gave of herself. Jesus said that's what God's kingdom, being part of God's kingdom, is like. So yes, Jesus talked a lot about money. Jesus was often lured into theological and political debates. Today's theological, political debate. Jesus, is it lawful to pay taxes or not? Pharisees and the religious leaders, many of whom dressed in fancy religious garments like I'm wearing, were often fond of trying to get Jesus. I got you. I'm going to ask you this very difficult question to see what side of the fence you're on. It's what we do in our country today way too much. Instead of having a conversation and getting to know someone, I'm going to ask you a difficult question, and I want to know what side of the fence you come down on so I can get you. And Jesus was a part of this. A lot of Pharisees did this to find out, Jesus, we're going to trick you with this question. So Jesus, ever shrewd and wise, said, take the coin that's in your pocket and show it to me. So they pulled a coin out, and Jesus asked, what's on it? Well, of course, as a Roman province, there was an image of the emperor, and there was an inscription over it. And the inscription over it loosely translated, loosely read, to our God. Keep in mind, Jesus is asking this question to a group of Jews. He's asking the religious leaders who, by the way, collected money for Rome. None of us like paying taxes, do we? Do you? No? It's not meant to be a trick question for you. So Jesus kind of put it back on them. Said, you hypocrites. The money you use with the inscription, you claim that the emperor is God. Jesus says, give the emperor what's due to the emperor, because all of us have to pay taxes. But then he says, give God what is due to God. It's a way of sort of twisting the logic, turning the tables back on them. To say, not only do you need to pay the emperor, but you need to give God what is owed to God. I'm reminded of this parable at least 4 times a year. I have my quarterly estimate vouchers that hang from a magnet on the side of my refrigerator. So at least 4 times a year, I'm reminded about paying taxes. Oh, have to do that yet again. And I'm also reminded when I do that about my commitment to all of you and to St. Andrews and to trying to be part of God's kingdom. For Alexis and I tithe. We tithe on our gross income. As clergy, I am taxed one of the highest tax brackets. I'm considered an independent employee, an independent contractor. So those of you who are independent contractors know what I speak of. It's not much fun when it comes to taxes. So when Alexis and I sit down and figure out our budget every year and what we value to spend money on and what we believe is important, by the time we pay our taxes and tithe, nearly $27,000 is already off the table. But you know what? That's okay. I live in the best country on the planet. I drove here this morning on some of the best roads. The food we eat is regulated. Most of it is regulated. We enjoy a lot of wonderful things. So yes, while I'm not thrilled with all of my taxes, when I do step back and think about the world I live in, the life I enjoy, this wonderful country, it helps somewhat to write that check. It makes writing that check a little better. And then I think about St. Andrews and for this church that I'm grateful for, and for all of you. Even in the midst of some of our disagreements and differences, I am grateful for all of you and to be part of this wonderful parish. And so when I tithe, I know that I'm giving out of abundance to this great parish. I don't figure out my budget and then whatever is left over at the end, okay, God, I will give this to you. These are the leftovers, the crumbs. I sit down and think about the abundance, everything that is given to me and that I enjoy. What can I do with that to help you and to help our neighbors? And so when we get together as vestry and office staff to figure out this budget, it's not just really adding up numbers. While that's needed, it's more than adding up numbers. It really is trying to figure out, what do we do for each other? What is the ministry that we do for each other? From wonderful music, yes, keeping the lights on, yes, installing a new roof because the old one leaked all the time, to helping facets and echo. There are all kinds of things that that budget represents. Yes, it is about money, but it's also about you and me and trying to figure out what it means to be disciples of Jesus in Burke, what we do for each other and what we do for our neighbors. But I approach giving from abundance. This is what God has blessed me with. What can I share? So yes, you hear a lot about money in church. You hear a lot about money from Jesus and our relationship to money. Fran was correct. Tim, it seems this time of year they talk a lot about money. As Pete Kirkham reminded us last week, standing in this very pulpit, part of what this means is we need each other. We need all of you. Whatever it is that you can pledge, whatever it is that you can give. And giving is also more than giving your money. Giving is giving yourself. Giving yourself maybe to sing in the choir. Giving yourself to volunteer at facets. Whatever that might be. To give of your time, talent, and treasure, as they say in the church. Whatever that is. We need each other. I need you. I need each and every one of you. We need each and every one of you. We need each other. In the name of God.